So, Dr. Winters, welcome virtually to Nashville, and we are so glad to have you.
Richard, thank you so much. Thank you. I'm really excited to be with you, even if it's through a screen here this morning. And for all of you who are children of the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, yes, I get to work in, I think, the happiest place on earth. It is certainly an honor to represent the legacy of Fred Rogers. And at the Fred Rogers Center, we're located right outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in I like to call original Mr. Rogers neighborhood, in Fred's hometown of Latrobe. And here we house the Fred Rogers Archive, which to date is about 22,000 items. And from that archive, so much of our work grows in ways to extend the values and philosophies of Fred through many different places. Now, at the Fred Rogers Center, you may expect us to work directly with children. And since Fred did that across over 30 years and 895 episodes of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. But instead, at the Fred Rogers Center, we work with children's helpers. And the reason we call them children's helpers is you may be familiar with the Fred Rogers quote, "Look for the helpers." And that's a part of why we refer to them as children's helpers, because for us, helpers is a term of respect. It's a term of endearment. They are the people that we look to in times of challenge. And to look for the helpers means to support those who are supporting the healthy development of children and families and communities. So many of you are helpers. So many of you are supporting the needs of children, the needs of families, the needs of communities. We applaud you in those efforts because in Fred Rogers' words, it's when we see people helping, we know that there is hope. And thank you for the hope that you've given, not just over the last 2 years. Dr. Jones just talked about how the last 2 years may jump immediately to our minds, but that there's so many years of helping, of supporting one another, of being a part of the times of uncertainty and challenge. So if I could ask the host to allow me to share my screen, please. I will proceed with a few slides today too. Thank you so much. Now, as I mentioned, the Fred Rogers Center, we support children's helpers. And through that work, we depend on the Fred Rogers Archive to guide a lot of what we do. So many of the ideas that Fred shared, although they were meant for children and families through a screen, I think the reason that when we think of Fred Rogers, we have a smile on our face and we have a warm, fuzzy feeling inside is one, the nostalgia of sweaters and sneakers, of that smile and that slow pace of talking. But it's also because so much of what he shared is still resonant today. It still matters today. That we haven't lost the meaning of that, even though we are no longer children. When I was thinking about starting this talk here today, I was reflecting on some of Fred's words that we've been thinking about recently here. And it's over the last few years, we've been thinking a lot about how things have changed, of course, how a lot of our work in service of children and families has changed. It's become more difficult. We need to acknowledge that. And around those years, we've likely asked ourselves a simple question, a question that Fred Rogers asked a group of people that were convening to think about their own work once. At the National Association for the Education of Young Children in 1983, Fred posed a very simple question to those in the audience. And as I was listening to this speech, getting ready for today, it struck me how quiet everything got when he asked this question. He asked the audience, Do you ever wonder if you've made a difference in this life? Apologize. Cutting out there for a moment. But Fred asked, do you ever wonder if you've made a difference in this life? Whether any of those children who have come to you for care remember anything that you did for them, any ways you cared for them. As you can imagine, it was quiet in the audience as people reflected on, have I made a difference? Does what I do matter? And that's a question that we ask ourselves as helpers quite often, because as helpers, we're invested in supporting the healthy development of children, families, and communities. But quite often, we don't get to see the fruits of all of those efforts. I like to say, especially in the world of early childhood or in the world of supporting children, youth, and families, we're in the business of planting seeds that we trust will grow, but seeds that we can only nourish for so long because our time with children, our time with families is limited. But what is it that we can learn across many years of helping relationships, across many years of helpers working to build and maintain connections with families and with children that show us the incredible difference that we make in the lives of others? Well, I think the first thing that I've learned in working with helpers across many different settings is that having at least one helper truly matters. And what does that mean? Well, across any settings that we have traveled to support interactions and relationships between adults and children, what we've noticed is that in all of those places, some of them unlikely, the power of having one person who sees you, who knows you, who acknowledges you is incredibly important. I mentioned unlikely places for this work. We, of course, started our work in early childhood. We've worked in orphanage environments. We've worked in many places that are created to support the healthy development of children. But we've also worked in places where we catch these human relationships happening where they may not be actively supported. One of those places was the street corners of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I spent nearly a year working with the crossing guards who support the city of Pittsburgh. What's interesting about these crossing guards is they do not report to any school system. Instead, they report to the chief of police. They're a part of the Department of Public Safety in Pittsburgh. So once again, not a place where you would expect that relationships with children and small interactions are a priority. For these mostly women in the city of Pittsburgh, their outcomes for their job are measured in pedestrian safety. And that's pretty much the entirety of their job description, to keep children and families safe as they're crossing the busy streets of the city in the morning. However, I'd like to introduce you briefly to one of these women to show you just a glimpse of what she does in the mornings and in the afternoons for maybe an hour at a time to keep children and young people and families safe. And to notice that she does far more than just keep children physically safe. That when it comes to having at least one person to see, hear, acknowledge, know, and value who you are, that oftentimes for the children and young people in her neighborhood, she rises to the top of the list. Take a look at just a little bit of one of Miss Paula's mornings.
Good morning. I like you here. Go ahead. Where's your jacket at?
I'm not cold.
You ain't cold? Okay. Where's your, I know, see, you got a jacket, huh? He said, I am. Good morning. She's grown up to be so beautiful. Look at her. Wow. I know. What? She looks just like you. That's your twin right there. Oh my. Good morning. Y'all go to the high school?
Yes.
All right, have a blessed day.
Thank you.
You're welcome, baby. And your lips is shivering.
All we care is about your face.
That's it, me too. That's the worst time when my face is cold. Yeah, it feel like, oh, mama, shh. I wish I could just warm you up. But it's just like my hair go good. Okay.
My face is cold.
Well, hurry up in then. It's time to go in, okay? Good morning.
Right.
Good morning. So, when are you going to know about the election? When you going to know if you won or not?
Okay.
Oh, huh. I got my fingers crossed for you. Even though I didn't get a cupcake, but I got my fingers crossed. Good morning, guys. Oh, your nails. Let me see your nails. All right, now. Let me see y'all of yours. All right, now. Go now. Your bad self. You cold?
Fall baby.
You a fall baby?
Yeah, my birthday's November.
See, I hold traffic for you. Good morning, baby girl. I like your little bun. Your mom did your hair? Tell her I give her 100%.
Now, it's hard to imagine some of those small moments being a part of big relationships. But what we see is Miss Paula actively working to remember, such as a spreadsheet in her mind, all of the important parts of the day for each of these children and young people and families, noticing that one boy had a jacket the day before, didn't have it today, asking about an election, noticing that the nail color on some of the girls had changed, that she is that invested in these small moments to be able to see and acknowledge the children who she's responsible for keeping safe each morning. She refers to herself as an early morning street parent. And I think that's exactly what she is. And one young man stopped me to say, Miss Paula wasn't here last week, and I didn't know what to do because she wasn't here to say good morning, and my entire day felt weird. It's an incredible difference to make in the smallest of moments. And now I teach child development. I've been a part of early childhood quality systems for quite some time. I've got binders and binders that tell us about the importance of relationships in children's development. But I'm yet to find a place that says crossing guards play an important role in the development of children and young people. And it's because it's so many people through our communities that can make the difference in changing the trajectory of a moment, a day, a life for a child. And so often we think of the clear people who have these touch points, yet we all have a responsibility to be able to extend that value, to extend that acknowledgement to one another. Because even though there are so many places within these binders, within these guides and curricula that tell us how to support children, sometimes it's only what's counted in these measures and assessments that truly matter. However, sometimes what counts can't be counted easily. And at the end of the day, it's these simple and deep moments that build relationships in small ways and big ways that are so much more important than the shallow and complex parts of our days. So what does it mean to have at least one? Well, it means to have someone like Miss Paula, someone who cares, someone who can extend those thoughts, someone who can extend a hand to see, acknowledge, and value our children and young people, regardless of the setting. Dr. Jones talked about adverse childhood experiences. So many of those adverse childhood experiences feel outside of our reach,
to change. But we know from research that what offsets those adverse childhood experiences are positive childhood experiences that begin with relationships. They begin in an environment where children and young people can find safety and trust and value. And it's those at least ones that make a difference in the lives of so many as we grow through adversity, as we are faced with hosts of challenges, that at the end of the day, what makes the difference is having at least one stable and committed relationship with an adult who is inside or outside of the home. And in the words of Fred Rogers, he talks how human relationships are primary in all of living, that when the gusty winds blow and shake our lives, if we know that people care about us, we may bend with the wind, but we won't break. And isn't that resilience right there? Bending with the gusty winds, but not breaking. Many of us want to change the gusty winds. And for some of us, we have that power to approach the gusty winds and help them to shift. But for many of us, our capacity lies in being that buffer that helps others to bend with the wind, but not break. It's what it means to be at least one in the life of another person. The second thing I'd like to offer today around the importance of maintaining and building connections, especially in terms of challenge and uncertainty, is that when we talk about human relationships, we could spend the rest of the day talking about what is a relationship. What does it mean to be in relationship with another person? How do we define relationship? But at the end of that day, my hunch is that we'd come to understand that the power of all of our human relationships, that the power comes from simple and ordinary interactions. Interactions that may feel mundane, interactions that may not even register in our memories. If you ask a child, maybe a child of your own or a child that you've taught, child that you've come into contact with, about a memory they have with you, chances are you're not going to remember that same memory. Because oftentimes it's those simple moments that are so deeply felt by children and young people. What does that mean in terms of Miss Paula? Well, I can't imagine Miss Paula remembers every interaction that she has and every single day, but the children certainly do. And it's because those interactions are made of something. And they're made of 4 dimensions of interactions that help us to grow relationships. That in every one of these interactions, no matter how small, there is a sense of connection. There's an emotional engagement or attunement between the two people. Miss Paula, she did that through laughter quite often, but she also matched the needs of the children crossing the street, understanding very quickly where their emotional level was, trying to match that need. Maybe make them slightly more happy about walking into school right after they passed her. And she mentioned that she didn't know what happened in the lives of children before they got to the crosswalk. And she didn't know what happened in the lives of children after they left the crosswalk. But she was responsible for the crosswalk. And it was in that crosswalk where she tried her best to connect with each child or young person who came through. It's also within that crosswalk that she offers a sense of reciprocity, that there's a give and take, conversational turns, there's a serve and return, that sometimes she's leading and sometimes she's following. That's exactly what children need, even in 15 seconds. She works hard to make sure that each child feels included, that inclusion in these moments is not necessarily about just opening up and providing access. Rather, it's about providing the support necessary so that every child and young person can realize the importance of these relationships, that they can play an active part in these interactions. So when we talk about inclusion, it's not enough to just open the doors. We have to provide the support necessary so that those who are least able or least willing or least likely to engage, that they have the capacity to do so. And finally, these interactions are made of opportunities for growth, for development. Maybe with Miss Paula, it's about the conversation, but it's also about growing in relationship with another person. It's about growing in confidence that you matter. There are all kinds of growth. There's academic growth, of course. There's cognitive growth. There's physical growth. There's social emotional growth. And all of that growth happens within the context of relationships. And it's in each of these very tiny moments that we realize that importance. Because when we string together all of these moments, that builds our relationships. Now, our first two that we've talked about here feel a little bit child and youth centric. We're looking to support the needs of children and youth through relationships, through simple, ordinary interactions. But at the end of the day, our adults need support and appreciation and relationships too. Because if we think about the ecosystem around children and youth, we may start with a single child in hopes that if we are focused on bringing relationship to children, that those relationships begin within families. We hope that the first relationships are happening there. We know that's not always true, but our hope is that there's some family member, be that family member, a grandparent, a parent, foster parent, whatever that happens to be, that the child feels some safety and trust within the home. We also know that children are building relationships outside of the home, that they're building these relationships with a host of helpers, home visitors, pediatricians, caseworkers, social workers, educators, the list goes on and on. And we know that when we are able to provide that at least one relationship for children, we know that that makes a difference. We hope that there is far more than at least one. But here is where a lot of our thinking stops, that as long as we're giving these children their relationships, then our job is done. But there's a much bigger ecosystem happening around children and young people that is affecting how they develop. It's affecting how they see themselves and how they extend relationship to others. We have to complete this triangle here. We need our helpers and our families to be in relationship with one another. Dr. Jones mentioned it earlier. It must be more than transactional. It must be a true partnership between our families and our helpers in support of the healthy development of children and young people. But even here, we cannot expect our families to be doing this alone. We cannot expect our families to be able to meet the needs of children in a vacuum or in a silo. We have to build strong communities of support around our families to support them in their needs of helping their children to learn and to grow and to develop in a healthy way. Much of our social policy is looking at this picture right here, being able to support the needs of families, provide services, be able to increase the likelihood that children are growing in a place of relationship through schools, through informal institutions, through families. And sometimes we ignore the left side of this picture, that we forget that for our helpers to do the work of helping, they need that same community of support. Our helpers need to know that they are seen and heard and acknowledged and valued through peers that help them to see that help them in their practice, and by others who are there with support and respect for the work of helping. Because it's across all of these relationships, whether they are directly with the children or around the children, where children are learning what it means to engage with their own community. Because at the core of each one of these arrows and dotted lines are simple interactions that are building relationships, are relationships that are present to help all of us to grow and to develop and to bend with the gusty wind, but not break. Which means at each one of these touch points, wherever we see ourselves within this picture, we have the responsibility to ask ourselves this question. In whatever work it is that we do, in the work of being a family, in the work of supporting others, supporting programs, or making decisions at the policy level that shape so much of what this work can look like. How do any of our decisions, whatever decision that happens to be, how does it help to encourage, enrich, and empower the human interactions and relationships around children, families, and their helpers? Because the flip side of this is, what is it that we are doing? What decisions are we making that are discouraging or disempowering the opportunity for relationships? Because we know that every moment has an opportunity to either humanize or dehumanize another person. Are we making choices that bring courage to those whose lives move closest to us? Are we making decisions that encourage opportunities for relationships to grow, relationships that we know are central to the healthy development of children, of families, and of communities? Over the last 2 years, we've been facing this question in many, many new ways, because it feels like every decision that we make is imperfect. Those of us who are supporting the needs of children, I think a lot of us are feeling like doesn't matter what we do, it's just not fully right. As a mom myself, certainly know that feeling. And through that time, our helpers have continued to support the needs of others, but that picture that I showed earlier may not feel as familiar right now. It might not feel like everybody's working together toward the relationship building, toward an ecosystem based upon those relationships to meet the needs of others. It may feel a little more like this. Like there are connections being made, but they're imperfect. That we are physically distant in ways that haven't been before. And when I talk with some of my colleagues who are in direct practice, they tell me that their picture feels just a lot like this. It feels lonely. It feels isolating. And while Fred reminded us to think of children first, and I want to reiterate that if you have anything to do in the life of a child, please think of that children's needs. Listen to that child. Learn from him. Learn from her. Think of children first. Might I add that we should think of our helpers next. Listen to them, learn about them, and learn from them. Because we will not make a lasting impact on children and young people if we are skipping over the needs of our helpers. For our helpers to do this work, they must be well, which means we have to do our best to help the helpers. And that means doing for the helpers what the best helpers are doing for children and families. It means wrapping them in an environment of relationships. It means rebuilding this picture so that they feel that there's a community around them, that every head within this picture feels like there's a community around. And we see ourselves maybe in a few spots here, but oftentimes when I look at this picture, I feel a bit intimidated because there's no way one person can have the capacity to adjust all of these places, to touch all of these places. But then I'm reminded of the metaphor of the still pond when it begins to rain, and how raindrops will not touch every single part of the pond, but the ripples will begin to share that touch across many places. We all have an opportunity to make our own ripple across this picture, to touch the life of another person, to extend that relationship, that support, that trust, that safety, that value to one another. So as we do that, we can reflect, what is our touch point? What is the place where we can make a ripple to encourage, enrich, and empower human interactions around children, around families, and around helpers? Now, I can't be at the Fred Rogers Center and not bring a little message from Fred himself. As you may know, Fred did not talk directly to adults all that often, but he did in times of tragedy and challenge and uncertainty in our country. And if you happen to come across an episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood now as an adult, chances are you'll catch that he was talking to you also. But we do have a couple of videos where Fred was talking directly to adults. Of course, we have his speeches, but these videos are typically videos of gratitude, videos of hope, videos of extending support to those who are supporting the needs of others. The closing video I've brought with me today to share with all of you comes to us arguably after the last time we all went through a collective experience, which is September 11th of 2001. This video was Fred's thank you message to those who were supporting children on the 1-year anniversary of September 11th. It's also one of the final videos that we have of Fred. He died in February of 2003. This video is one that I hope as you listen, you can reflect a bit on the last few years. And my hope is, as Dr. Jones said, hope abounds for what can be in the future, in knowing that you, as people who care about the development of children and families and communities, you are the helpers who bring that hope to so many others. But I'll end today with this simple message from Fred.
You know, it happens so often. I walk down the street and someone 20 or 30 or 40 years old will come up to me and say, "You are Mr. Rogers, aren't you?" And then they tell me about growing up with the neighborhood and how they're passing on to the children they know what they found to be important in our television work. Like expressing their feelings through music and art and dance and sports and drama and computers and writing, and invariably we end our little time together with a hug. I'm just so proud of all of you who have grown up with us, and I know how tough it is some days to look with hope and confidence on the months and years ahead. But I would like to tell you what I often told you when you were much younger. I like you just the way you are. And what's more, I'm so grateful to you for helping the children in your life to know that you'll do everything you can to keep them safe and to help them express their feelings in ways that will bring healing in many different neighborhoods. It's such a good feeling to know that we're lifelong friends.
Being with us here today, Richard, thank you for the invitation to join you, even through a screen. I hope that this is the beginning of our lifelong friendship. If this is a conversation you'd like to continue, please let me know. But I wish you well for the rest of your day together in the important work that you are doing. Thank you.